to try to do a simple adjourned debate on this amendment so that we could move on to the other amendment so that all the members of the subcommittee, I knew that once we went down this rabbit hole where we allowed more members to ask questions, that there would be more questions that would need to be asked and answered. So we're either going to continue to do this, or we're going to adjourn debate on it, hear the other amendment, and then take a vote on both amendments. Or,
That was my question procedurally. If you took a, if you pass this amendment, could you take it the next amendment and move the exact same way?
no, I don't think so.
I guess you could.
Just strike all and insert, so you strike all, insert, and then you, if the other one got voted up, then you'd strike all and insert again.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I might, in fact, that would be the best alternative, because this amendment becomes the substitute for the bill that was introduced. And then, if you pass this, then you can do a strike and insert on this as your amendment does.
Motion to adjourn debate.
Representative Putnam has made a motion to adjourn debate. Representative Rivers has seconded that motion. So that's a vote. All those voting in favor to do a simple adjourn debate on Representative Skelton's amendment, raise your hand. 5, 6. Well, all those opposed, signify that you're opposed. So we've adjourned debate on Representative Skelton's amendment. Now I'll introduce my amendment. I think all the subcommittee members have gotten a copy today, correct?
Yes, all of them.
So, in section 1, paragraph 1, comprehensive health education, this section is pretty much verbatim to the version of Representative Skelton's amendment. Paragraph 2, reproductive health education, this section reads almost exactly like Representative Skelton's amendment, even removing the words outside marriage as has been requested. We have kept the words unrelated to reproduction to keep the instruction on the topic of reproduction. Now what has been called for as outer course, as was referenced earlier by I think both Representative Skelton and Representative Rivers, or gateway sexual activity, we have also removed extra words to simplify and make consistent with other sections. On section 4, or I'm sorry, same section, paragraph 4, subsection C, contraceptive was added as desired by Representative Skelton, but after the words of future family planning rather than before. So it was just a changing around of the words. In paragraph 8 of that same section, sexual activity is defined here because it will be referenced later in the amendment. Paragraph 9, this definition, medically accurate information, is taken mostly from the Skelton Amendment, with some additional wording to protect scholarly abstinence groups whose program has been approved by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, but not yet published in an academic journal. So that probably is the most, the first substantive point where my amendment is different from Representative Skelton's amendment in an effort to try to strike greater compromise with the other groups that would be opposed. I'll take questions as soon as we're done, if that's okay. It's paragraph 9 of section 1. We're still in section 1. Page 3. So that's the first substantive change to the bill where both parties sort of differed, and I thought the additional language was a better compromise for both parties to be able to move forward. Same section, paragraph 10, defines the words as evidence-based and are used later. Moving on to section 2, as was requested by Representative Skelton, this requires the instructional unit to be updated. The other party had, or we had used as a group compromise on every 2 years rather than every year. Section 3, paragraph 3, I think that's probably on page 5. This would begin, Representative Skelton's amendment wanted to make sure that students get the instruction before it's too late. This section 3 keeps their language entirely, but adds a sentence to rebut the accusation that there could then be hardcore sexual instruction for 11th and 12th graders. That was one of the concerns that came out, not only as a result of the first subcommittee hearing that we had, but also as a result of the subsequent compromise meetings that we had tried to hold in order to find a path forward, and that was one of the sticking points. So that would again be another substantive change between the Skelton amendment and this amendment. In paragraph B of that same section, as Representative Skelton would argue, there needs to be consequences for a local school board refusing to act. This way of dealing with it is a more serious accountability or consequence, but won't impose a state standard which makes some groups uncomfortable. Moving on to paragraph G in that same section, actually paragraphs G, H, and I. These subsections are from a Tennessee statute that was signed into law 1 year ago. When we were in the stages of compromise on this bill after the first subcommittee hearing, I had asked the other party if there was existing statute in another state from somewhere in the country that contained the language that they would find sufficient. And Tennessee was one such state that was pointed to, and the language in a bill that they had passed as I referenced 1 year ago. In section 4, section 5, towards the end of the first paragraph, the section that is underlined, this change simply encourages parents to interact with teachers on health education. There's no policy change there. And then in section 6, paragraph 3, Representative Skelton wanted instructors to receive mandatory professional development and be certified to teach health education. In order to get around concerns over the perspective of who does the instruction of the instructors and the certification, this requires the districts to publicly disclose whether their instructors are trained and certified. So one of the issues, as Representative Skelton has pointed out, is teacher certification. Those that are, and we all heard testimony on this during the first subcommittee hearing, those that are in the classroom teaching sex ed, they should be certified and trained to do so. Is that correct, Representative Skelton? Yeah. And there were some concerns from the other side of this issue, and this was sort of an effort to try to do both, where we find out what exactly is being done in schools, and whether we're talking about comprehensive health education, or we're talking about school safety, as we had the discussion last week, or we're talking about what other subjects we're going to be discussing more and more about Common Core. The fact of the matter is, we as a state, we as a General Assembly, don't really know what's taking place in our schools. And to try to put your arms around that and look at it from a 30,000-foot perspective is sometimes difficult. Some of you may have heard me reference a few weeks ago, the Education Oversight Committee had sent out a survey to every school district throughout the state to find out where they are with regards to implementing Common Core standards. I recognize I'm going a little bit off the path here, but just allow me some latitude here. Only 50% of our school districts throughout the state responded to that survey. Now, how are we in the General Assembly supposed to make policy decisions when we can't figure out what's actually going on in our schools? And so I think that this section in this paragraph puts that burden back on school districts to tell us, okay, who is in your classroom teaching these courses and what is their level of certification. Section 7 is, let me keep up here. Section 7, paragraph B. This section is from the Tennessee law, but also tracks a budget proviso 1.66 for the State Department of Education. Each school district is required to ensure that all comprehensive health education, reproductive health education, and family life education conducted within the district, whether by school district employees or a private entity, must utilize a curriculum that complies with the provisions contained in Chapter 32, Title 59. Any person may complain in a signed, notarized writing to the chairman of the governing board of a school district that matter not in compliance with the requirements of Chapter 32, Title 59 is being taught in the district. Upon receiving a notarized complaint, the chairman of the governing board must ensure that the complaint is immediately investigated, and if the complaint is determined to be founded, that immediate action is taken to correct the violation. If corrective action is not taken, then the district must have its base student cost reduced by 1%. Yes, that's right, Mr. Gomez. Punitive. Accountability. We're all about accountability. Section 8, first paragraph. This section also, again, from the Tennessee statute, is designed to prevent the use of curricula that are alleged to be used in South Carolina public schools. If these curricula are not being used, there should be no problem with sealing these titles. So again, this goes to address some of the concerns that Representative Putnam had in the first subcommittee hearing and brought up again in this subcommittee hearing, and again goes to answer the questions answered or asked of Representative Skelton, and back to my point of, we don't know what's being taught in schools. We received a lot of testimony the last time about what's been suggested to be taught, but there were some on the other side that took exception to what that testimony was. So again, this is just trying to be able to wrap our arms around this a little bit better. And then, last but not least, Section 9, the last section, is really just a curriculum transparency provision. Is that the best way to describe it? Okay. And it puts the burden on school districts and subsequently State Department of Education, maybe with a link on their website to the individual school district's website, to disclose exactly what is being taught in the classroom relative to sex education. Any questions?